Hi, everyone. This is Arabella, the founder of High Maintenance Trim Co., a cannabis processing service provider located in Northern California. We're the business that you didn't know you needed, saving you time and money by bringing experts to your facility. Follow our journey through the industry. You work for Greenbroz. How long have you been working for them?
Excellent question. So I actually came on board with them. It's going on 2 months now. So it's been fresh. I've actually known Cullen and team for several years now, just being tied to the industry and, being from California, like I think all of us are. So it almost felt like it was inevitable for me to make this jump over to this company. It just had to be the right timing. So it's been good.
Have you been in the industry? Have you been around cannabis a lot?
Yeah, I definitely have. I grew up in NorCal, up in Marin County, and so was always right there at the gateway to the industry. So definitely have a bit of ties to the legacy side that I didn't even really share openly until the last few years, because there is obviously a statute of limitations to certain things. So I'll just leave it at that.
I think all of us kind of get that little I want to say it, but I don't I want you to know I have experience, but I don't want to go to jail for it. So can I say that right now?
That's it. And I was like, it kind of sounds weird saying, that's how I went to college, but I'm like, no, I can be honest. I could have gone to San Luis Obispo, not for this plant. So I have to, I think it's time to be a little truthful. And again, it's been, I won't date myself, but it's been some time. So, yeah. But I cut my teeth in Colorado in the legal market. So a good friend, Ricardo Baca, who both of us had come from Scripps Media. You might know HGTV, DIY, Food Network. That's all under the Scripps umbrella. Yeah. And he was kicking off a new site called The Cannabist through DFM and the Denver Post out in Denver, and ended up coming on board. And first was working behind the scenes as the director of digital ad operations, and then came on as the general manager there. So I was there for a bit, and then Weedmaps swooped me up. So I was actually the head of media operations, both domestic and global, for Weedmaps for a few years. And then Boveda swooped me up, and Boveda was looking to further themselves into what they called the herbal category. They're PC company out of Minnesota. So yeah, that was their terminology. But they were kind of still a bit early in the industry. So they brought me on board to really take it to the next level, which was fun. That's where I got to really travel the world and see what the industry was like in South America, and out in Australia, and all across Europe, and even Israel. But obviously was growing that brand at that same time. So it was a good experience. But yeah, when the pandemic came, I got Boveda, I think, to where I wanted them to be, where they needed to be, and they're still doing phenomenally well. I'm still really good friends with the CEO and the team, but I wanted something a little bit closer to home, because they were, at the end of the day, they're based out of Minnesota, and I was traveling 75% of the time. I did 120,000 miles in the air in 2019 alone, and visited and attended or spoke at 46 conventions in 18 and 30, I want to say 30 conventions in 19. So I was kind of tired.
You still need a vacation.
I am. I took a little bit of time off before Greenbroz. It is interesting because the industry, I love this industry. You guys know, it's all good vibes. And when you're in, you're in. And everyone kept pulling at me, but I'm like, to your point, I was like, I need a little time out. Even just projects around the house. I need to finish this motorcycle I've been working on. I have my own garden that I need to tend to. So, but yeah, it's been good. So I've been in it in the legitimate side, or the legal side, since late 2013. So It's been nice. Yeah.
It's funny. We have all these really these words that are just so much gentler. Like we say, we're a legacy operator, or we're in the traditional market. It sounds so much better than I used to do black market stuff. I was kind of the same way though too. We have an episode, and I'm actually writing a book now too. And so nice. I have a whole thing where it's called Pig's Feet and Chicken Liver. That's the name of the podcast. And that was basically when we were kind of living a double life. My husband and I, we were growing and trimming and doing all this stuff, at night. But then during the day, we had 5 kids, and he coached, and I was soccer mom. I was team football. We were very involved in the community. We did all that. And edibles saved my life. I can sleep right now with edibles. But I used to wrap them in paper towels and foil and put them in Ziploc bags. And I used to keep them in the freezer. And I would put pig's feet and chicken liver, the stuff the kids would never want to touch. They never want to touch that, right? I just want the popsicles. How can I get to the popsicles?
Oh yeah, that's smart.
So That's what we did. And so that's why I call that era of my life, I call it pig's feet and chicken liver. We have a episode on that.
Oh my gosh, that is so, and it's interesting. I've thought about that too, because some people are baffled when I bring this up, but I studied criminal law, criminology in college. Everyone's like, what? And how did you go what are you doing now? And I'm like, well, I make more money and less risk of being shot at. So that was the reason for going a different direction in my career. But it is really interesting in that, we grew up, yourself and I think both being of Gen X or lower Gen X, of it being stigma and so much tabooism associated with it. And I had to make a cognitive decision. My son's now, he's going to be, 10 in a few months. And so me getting into the industry when he was still very young, I was kind of contemplating, well, do I continue on that stigma that was instilled in us thanks to the DARE program, Daryl Gates,
Right.
Nancy Reagan, Nixon for the boomer generation, and Alsinger for the silent generation. All of us, each generation, if you think about it, from X up, has had some sort of propaganda generator that's weaponized this plant. I don't know how else to put it. I think that's honest, especially the way it targeted minority groups, which still is appalling in this country. So anyway, I made that cognitive decision. I'm like, no, I'm going to educate my son, because we were at a level of legalization. We were living in a legal state of Colorado. And so he understands that it's a medicine, but even that was unique in helping him understand. He said, well, it doesn't look like other medicine. It's not like that cough syrup stuff when I'm sick, and it's not like an Advil, like his mom takes. And I said, it's not, because those are man-made, or in many instances, synthetic medicine. This is a natural medicine from the earth. So when you see dad eating turmeric and ginger and echinacea and all these other natural things, it's the same. And so helping him understand and appreciate, it was interesting though, because I had to explain that a little bit later on. When he was younger, he would always see the plant, the leaf, everywhere he's like, Daddy, it's your company. It's your company. I'm like, well, the plant isn't my company, but and I did worry, because you've probably seen the video. It was somewhere on YouTube. It went a bit viral, where I guess the little girl went to school and said that her dad grows weeds, and that that he grows weed, and that he's got weed in his backyard. And he's like, oh, your teacher called and said that you told them we grow weed. Where is this weed? And she points outside. Literally, there's a little weed next to the grass. And she's like, see, you're growing weeds here and you're growing weeds there. And he's like, yeah, those are weeds. That's not weed, honey. That's getting us in trouble. So it's just a different time for everyone to
So different. And it's true. Like I grew up in my family, very traditional Mexican family. I was born and raised in Oakland, and weed and heroin were the same thing in my house. Drugs is drugs. The DARE program, say no to drugs, the whole war on drugs. And it's interesting, like, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I just, plant medicine is real. I've heard the term plant medicine. It's like, like even in Oakland, like their shrooms are legal now. People are microdosing, and they're not party drugs. At some point they did get turned into party drugs, but they're not party drugs. These have been around for thousands and thousands of years. Oh, yeah. And like I said, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but when I came back from Costa Rica, we were talking about plant medicine and ayahuasca and the mushrooms in cannabis. We were talking about all these things that said, once upon a time, the women were the healers. The women brought the plants, and they were the healers, and they healed the men, the children, everyone, and they used plants, And then colonialism came along, and fast forward, and now if it's not in a pill, if it's not in a bottle, if it doesn't have a prescription on it, then it's taboo. And so, the women that were once healers became witches. And so they stopped practicing plant medicine. And I think that's when things kind of got out of whack. And so here we are now, like your son, if it's not in a pill, in a box, they're like, what the hell you mean this is medicine?
Yeah.
They don't recognize it as medicine anymore. We've gone so far from where the healing started to where if it's not, my mom's the same way. My mom's so traditional, but she's funny. She knows that I've been in the industry for a couple of years now. So I was like, okay, look, Dad, I got to break it to you. This is what I've been doing. I have an LLC. It's legit. They were retired. They were bored as hell. You guys are going to come work at in the garden with me.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I brought them in. And so they're like the best, like they buck like nobody's business. They come in, all the hand bucking, and it's like sheer entertainment too. Cause they're like ornery people, and they're like, you're so slow. Well, yeah, that's cause you didn't bring me lunch. And it's pure comedy. It's pure comedy. But they're into it, so it's really helped them kind of, get out of the house and work on stuff. But yeah, it was, my parents were kind of like, no, this is like, it's drugs. And then now and it got to the point where I told my mom, look, you could potentially stop taking sleeping pills. I do. And you could possibly not be in pain because there's inflammation in your body. So I finally got her to try gummies, and
Yeah.
because it's in a package and it has a little, zip thing that you
Yeah.
open, tamper proof. I gave it to her, and she was like, oh my God, I slept so good. So now she's like a believer. She uses tincture now too. She doesn't smoke. She doesn't like all that kind of stuff, but now she sees the benefits of it. So now I'm like, why did they ever teach us that this was like crack?
Yeah, it was. I tell people that Dare, they talked about it in school. I was like, Dare is literally what introduced me to illicit drugs. I think it was a sheriff. I want to say it was at the time for me, it would have been a Contra Costa County sheriff that was heading up the Dare program. He lit something. Maybe it was hemp. I don't know, but they literally lit something and then did the kind of assimilated smoking within a 2-liter bottle, like a Coke bottle, and they drilled a little hole and put a joint in the end. I don't know what that was. I still am curious to the day because it smelled like cannabis. Like, that's where I learned what cannabis smelled like. Because even in the Bay Area when we were younger, it was, there was, we were part of, there was the hippie movement, the alternative lifestyle movement, the me era, like all these things. But a lot of that was really kept behind closed doors, at least when we were children. But going back to what you're talking about with the plant medicine or Eastern medicine, that's where I tell people I'm so thankful for growing up in the Bay Area, because a majority of my life, my best friends were always Asian American. So their families, which I'm so fortunate that they did open up and help me understand, to your point, all these natural remedies that they have been using for centuries that they brought over. And some of them, unfortunately, like you said, it's, if it doesn't fit in this box, if it doesn't fit in this pill form, which really, if we boil that down to capitalism, if it isn't something that can be, obviously licensed, or something that can't be trademarked or secured by IP, then, they don't want anyone to touch it. And it gets down this political rabbit hole. But it is unfortunate because you're right. I gave up. I never abused anything. I don't have don't have an addictive personality, I guess. So I can take or leave anything. But to your point, after learning enough about the plant in recent years, I stopped taking Advil and Tylenol, especially after the Advil reports on what it does, how much it taxes your system, your kidney and liver specifically. But I stopped, Advil, Tylenol, any sort of Sominex or Unisom or anything like that. Literally when people, well, what do you do now? I said, well, I take CBG, cannabidiol, because that helps with anti-inflammatory. Well, how do you help sleep? Well, I take CBN, that's cannabinol. It's a natural sleep inhibitor. Well, what do you do for that? Well, there's always something, And so helping them understand, but to your point, a lot of people are like, well, I'm not going to smoke, which I understand. We've made smoking taboo in not just the state, but this country. So it's like, no, you don't have to. There's tinctures, there's transdermals, there's oils, there's pill form, there's suppository, for crying out loud. That's the crazy thing about this plant, is the way it's processed. You can consume it in every single form. And I had one time, I almost hung up on this guy. He called up. It's when I was at the Cannabist, and we were a news media site. So this gentleman, he had spent 26 years in the industry. He was one of the guys that created Roundup, his Ortho Round. He had some sort of ties, Ortho and Monsanto. So I was like, sorry, I don't, homie, don't play that kind of attitude. As soon as he divulged it, he's like, but let me explain. He's all, but that aside, I'm getting into cannabis. I'm trying to right the wrongs, all the rest of it. He tried to kind of repent on the call, but he explained that why it's so tough with this plant is that exact reason. He said, unlike other things, this can be consumed in every form and fashion. Mm-hmm. So we have to be very cognizant, especially being a part of the phytoremediation class. We have to be cognizant in the quality of the plant, because it has to be regulated that much more, since you can smoke it in syrup and ingest it and all the other forms. So it's a unique solution, but I'm with you. It's one that's the only thing in my medicine cabinet now. Really.
Yeah, it really does. And like our kid, I'm trying to, I'm trying to have my kids unlearn what we taught them and relearn a different way. And like when I was in Costa Rica, I was doing some plant medicine, and I was checking in with my kids, and, sometimes you have little lingering effects. And my son, he's 18. He was so bothered. I couldn't believe how bothered he was that I looked a little affected. And I said, I said, Christian, I was like, my mind is wide open right now. I'm creative. I'm writing a book right now.
Yeah.
I said, Mom is like, I'm in my happy place. That shouldn't bother you. But I said, you just can't get past the point where you're like, Mom's high. You're still
Yeah.
hung up on that, And he's like, yeah. And I said, I can be put together now and later on I could be in my creative. I'm like, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm asking you to let go of some of the things that were taught to me that were then taught to you. We kind of have to relearn some things. And so
It's true.
he kind of let go a little bit, but he was still just so bothered.
It's tough. It's understandable. You're right. It is. You've been told, to say it, it's a bit blunt, but you've been told
Yeah.
lies for so long that, say something enough times and you start believing it. And it is hard to unlearn. It's even at that age, it is because, but you go to other places. That's what, and I'm not even just speaking of third world, even other first world countries where you can tell that that stigma was never instilled or not instilled to the level in which it was in most Western and Commonwealth countries. So take, for example, how we treat cannabis in the US and other, to your point, other herbalistic or earth medicines. But Canada, Australia, a lot of the Commonwealth countries are really strict when it comes to cannabis.
Yeah.
But then I would go to your point, like did Expo Weed down in Santiago, Chile, and they actually had a designated area for families because there were people who were coming there for business because it was, kind of a recreational event, but it was still a B2B as well. But same with the Czech Republic. They literally had an on-site daycare at CannaFest in the Czech Republic where I literally looked in. They're 2-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds. I'm like, this is crazy. This is something where Child Protective Services, along with every law enforcement agency, would have been called if you saw this at an event in the US because of this stigma. But you go to another country that technically used to be under communist rule that is like, no, this is a business. We're going to treat it like a business. We're going to be professional. And I just hope we get there because that's one place where I don't feel we're leading the charge, unfortunately, is erasing the wrongs,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's awesome that you've worked in different countries. Do you guys do any work in Mexico? Do you guys have any equipment there?
We do have a bit. I would like to have more. I just posted up, kind of act as a bit of an industry leader on LinkedIn. So I'm very active on there. And I just posted up, how far Mexico has gotten along. And I'm very much impressed with what they've done in Mexico with the fact that not only did they say it should not be illegal, but they deemed it unconstitutional to be illegal, which I think is huge because it is a plant. But some people are offended when you say it's only a plant, but hello. Unlike even cocaine and other, opioids, those have to go through such a regime of processing in order to get the end result of what people abuse. Cannabis is a plant. It's really hard to wrong it. But I love how they've gone through our process. But that's what I highlighted. I said, does Mexico legalizing matter? Yes. Like this is a country that it might be 1/5 the size of Canada because everyone put Canada on a pedestal. I love our friends in the Great White North. They're great. They are second largest landmass, only behind Russia. But still, you look at Mexico, there's 130 million people in Mexico. There's only 36 million people up in Canada. There's more people in the state of California. So while Canada did make an impact, I do feel that Mexico, especially based on the background, because just like we have the Emerald Triangle, they have the Golden Triangle, which produces all kinds of things besides just cannabis.
Right.
And for them to say, we're going to make this legal and we're going to embrace it, I'm stoked. So we do need to create more of a presence in Mexico. We're actually doing that from a marketing standpoint right now.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I've been trying to pay attention to kind of my calling a little more. I think for some reason New Year's was just a really big turning point for me, and just kind of listening a little more to my intuition, doing some plant medicine. And I've definitely had, I'm first generation born here. My family's from Mexico. I don't know how familiar I'm with, are you familiar with Mexico at all? Like Guadalajara? So Guadalajara is kind of, if you were to put, like LA and UC Berkeley together, Guadalajara is a very big, it's where everyone goes to university, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the big city, very big, like arts galleries, very nice, upscale, malls and all that kind of stuff. But there's definitely kind of like a little hippie artsy, vibe to it. That's where my family is from. And all of my, cousins and uncles and like everyone lives there. And it's funny because they're like, why does everyone think that we want to come to the US? Like, schools and stuff, but they're all, they're architects and engineers and business owners and cafes. And so they own private schools. And so they're like, we would never want to move to the US.
There's
Please
more
don't.
expats moving to Mexico than any other country right now.
They
I don't
said,
know why
please.
people don't understand. Anyway, yeah, it's an
Yeah, they
interesting
said, can you please
scenario.
build the wall? Because you guys are taking over all of our beaches. People are just coming here,
Yep.
like, please go. So I just thought it was so funny. But I've just really felt a calling, and my cousins have been like, hey, come do cannabis here. You know all about it. You speak Spanish. Like, we want it. We want in, and we know people here. We're studying the regulations. And so I actually just scheduled a trip for the first week of May to go there. And there's a young lady that I met through LinkedIn, and she's originally from the US, but she's there and she's in Guadalajara and she's in the cannabis industry. So I said, you know what? I gotta go check it out. I've been ignoring the signs. I've been ignoring everyone, the calling, because everyone's like, oh, well, you already have investors. Don't even worry about that. You just bring your expertise. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I got it. Because I want to retire. I want a little house in Mexico by Lake Chapala, and I want one in Costa Rica. So I said, you know what? If I get those wheels in motion now and we get business booming and get it set up now, in 5 years, by the time I'm 50, like, I'm out of here. We can do this. So I told my cousin, okay, let's do it. So I'm going the first week of May to just kind of like check it out and start seeing what's possible out there. I said, my only fear is, what about the cartels? Are we kind of stepping on some toes here? Because I'm a little worried about that.
Yeah, there's no joke. I mean, that is a factor. And that's something I thought about, with Boveda when we were expanding that brand, being cognizant of, potential toes that could be stepped on, because that is unlike other markets that were on the cusp of converting to legalization. That's one that is a huge moneymaker for and not that it isn't in California, but in California, it's a little different demographic in the way, in the people that run that business in the underground. Right. But I agree with you. I mean, the potential is exponential, and it's so relevant to, again, the overarching movement, because so many people in the US, and we know this because we have friends in the industry, they're so focused on what's going on here. And my focus has always been on the global movement. Mm-hmm. And every country matters, especially a country, again, that has, Mexico is a very prosperous country. People don't understand that it's very self-sufficient in what it has by way of resources. And so an opportunity like this just opens up a whole other chapter. And it could be an evolution in the way even the government looks at things from a legal and an illicit standpoint. Because you mentioned, them, essentially changing at least the status of legality around psilocybin in certain in Berkeley, in Oakland, in Washington, D.C., at least locally descheduling or locally decriminalizing. And that's something that, again, countries like Portugal decriminalized all drugs. They stopped treating, abusers as if they were criminals and started helping them as if they were in need. And look at how successful Portugal has been in making that pivotal shift. And it's been over a decade since they made that change. And I think they're a good example at a smaller scale of what other countries, and again, it's coming. Oregon did that. Oregon's like, we're not going to make, people who have issues and who have abuse problems, we're not going to commercialize it in a cash crop or in a resource for us for income, rather be privatized, prisons or whatever other.
That word was in my mind. As soon as you started talking about that, I thought privatized prisons, privatized. And I try not to go there, but yes.
It's an industry. It is. It's crazy.
My favorite meme of like the year was the one that when I posted and I said, and just like that, weed went from illegal to essential.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That was the biggest outcome. And I'm Mr. Positivity. So it's always silver lining. And people are always like, how did you pull that out so quick? But every scenario, there's a silver lining, or at least a lesson learned. And I have to agree, that was the biggest thing for 2020 is the fact that we were deemed essential in most markets. And that really made a pivotal shift. I mean, just not even a month ago, they put any frontline dispensary workers, they're deemed essential employees. And all of a sudden they got in queue down in LA to be able to get the vaccination. And a lot of them stood back and said, no, we want, local municipality, law enforcement, fire, teachers to go first, and then we'll come up. But I think that did really point out the obvious. And it is even more so when they're saying that alcohol is I'm like, are you serious? Alcohol is by all intents and purposes a poison that we put in our body. I mean, I'm not knocking people that consume alcohol, but
it is. It's harmful for
you. It is. Yeah. I mean, I always joke around when I do rather be speaking on a panel or solo speaking when I bring up, because it's hard to not compare cannabis to alcohol because of the prohibition scenario between the two, right? So they both have been, chastised at some point in history. But I said, nothing against alcohol. I use it all the time when I scrape up my arm and need to clean the wounds. I mean, it is one of those things, but you do look at it, it's hard to state a case for validity in consuming alcohol versus consuming cannabis. So I think that much more for deeming it essential. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, it was such a game changer. And I was like, oh my God, I'm done. Like my business is done. I'm in the business of sending people into your business. I'm a very people-y business. So yep. I said, I'm done. I'm dead in the water. Like, oh, what am I going to do? I had like 50 employees when COVID hit. I was like,
oh, wow.
It was crazy. And then we didn't work for about a month. Then we became essential. And then I said, okay, I went out there client by client, making sure that I was comfortable with how they were mitigating the risks. What do you have? What's the PPE? And then we slowly started to kind of ramp back up, and we're still not back, we're still not back to where we were, pre-COVID, but it's given us some downtime to really put systems in place and really kind of restructure the business. So it's been, kind of a little bit of a downtime, but I think COVID really, I think it changed the perspective on a lot of things, and finally getting the laws don't reflect the statement. The regulations don't reflect the statement, but for us to finally be recognized, not us, the plant to be recognized as being medicinal and to be essential, it just kind of washed over us like, yes, like we are essential. This is important. Now, if only the regulations could just be a little bit easier.
It's true. It's true. And it's tough. You can't apply the regulations set forth to, or say on a pill or on a liquidous form medicine to a biomass. I mean, that's a thing that it really is. It's tough for people to understand that the tolerances vary because this isn't that excessively structured. It's very unique from, you all know more than anyone, from cultivar to cultivar, from, dense to fluffy and from this to that. I mean, there's so many variances. So it is a little tough to regulate and say, oh, every single dosage, even visiting Israel, which Israel has 3 different iterations or formats for consumption, all flower-based, or at least at the time when I was there. So you can get it essentially pre-ground. It blew my mind. So pre-ground in a blister pack. So it's like 1 gram per blister in this pack, right? Or you can get it in more of like a bulk form, I guess you'd say. So like, in increments of say 4 grams. And then you can get it in a pre-roll form. But the thing that surprised me is how much they tried to bring it into that regulatory and make it exact measurements. Because again, unless it's really homogenized, I think is the term, you're still going to have inconsistency from that one blister to the next. There's still that 1 gram is going to have a different level of terpenes and cannabinoids than the next one, than the next one. So I think that's where the regulations kind of get hung up, is they don't comprehend that this isn't a pill, that this isn't just this full processed liquid, or that, it's something more, when you're talking about the biomass or the flower as a whole. So it's an interesting space for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that, that things are definitely changing. So I have a ton of questions about your equipment.
Sure.
So I'm going to dive in. So, but just to kind of circle back to Mexico, if I do go and I start looking, I'm going to hook up some events. Maybe I'll invite you to go to the events and go out there and kind of start putting yourself on the map as well. Because
that would be great. That would be great. I have a friend down. He's in Mexico City, but he invited me down for a Vicente Fox's event he had a few years ago. And I asked him, I'm like, because I'm very familiar and I have enough friends down there, but I'm like, he's like, oh, this is Vicente's compound and this is whole next level. They have shuttle service literally from the airport to his compound and blah, blah, blah. And back then, as much as I was intrigued to go down and catch up with friends, it kind of felt like it was too soon, because they were just talking about the fact that it is unconstitutional, et cetera, et cetera. But now I do feel it is a time. So I'd love to take you up on the invite. And it is such a beautiful country. Again, some of the things we talked about, which we go on a tangent, but the potential is so there for all of us for opportunity.
I know it absolutely is. Are you strapped for time or anything? I want to be respectful.
No, I'm okay.
You're okay? Okay. So if we go over a little bit, you're fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
My noon got moved.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So I came from, we do 100% hand trimming. So when people say, what do you think about machines? Initially, I'm like, I'd be out of business if everybody just used machines
Yeah.
because we're mostly, hand trimming. So that was kind of, initially, and kind of as the years have gone on, I've learned that I think there's a place for machines. There's a place for hand trimming. I have some clients that use the machines to kind of clean it up, but then my crew
Yep.
still comes in to do the final touch up. That's kind of what we do. And there's other places it's just 100% machine, and then they wholesale it and they send it off. I actually got my hands on a Greenbroz trimmer. I think it's at the 210, the smaller one.
215.
215. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have
Yep.
that one. Haven't used it yet. So
Oh
kind of
wow.
that was one of my questions that I was going to ask you, but I actually bartered with it. I had a client who he said, I want you guys to come in and do your thing. And so we went in there and I saw the machine and he's like, no, he's like, I thought I was going to use it. And I'm like, the thing is like shiny, chromy, doesn't even look like it's used. And he said, he's like, I used it once or twice. And he said, it's a hassle. We still have to trim it. He's like, you know what? And I'm like, can I buy it off you? So the
In
fact
the
that it
ones
was
that they do.
fitting practically new. And so I bartered. I said, okay, we're going to deduct it from the invoice. And so I brought it. I have it. It's, I haven't used it. So kind of one of my questions was, what does the support look like from your company for people that do like buy the machines? How much support do you offer?
Yeah, so we're really big on customer service, and to your point, we do also have a lot of clients that do a hybrid model as far as utilization, which makes total sense, right? Because if you're talking about something like sour diesel, as one iteration, or forbidden fruit as another, right? We all know forbidden fruit is finicky. So we have some clients that are like, we prefer to do our forbidden fruit by hand, whereas we'll run sour D through the machine. And depending on what rating we give this, if it's a reserve, mid shelf, or top, then we'll do the cleanup and the final trim. A lot of companies too, they love being able to do that because it still brings that personal touch. Like you all do speed trimming, but you also do very high touch boutique, that very high end style trimming. And so we have a lot of clients that are the same way. We support all of them. We love supporting them in whatever fashion and means in which they use the machine. And that applies to people who do purchase secondhand. To your point, it's funny because it's so uncommon to find them. We used to here and there see them on Craigslist or maybe on eBay. But people that have them love them and typically keep them, and we build them to last. That's the thing is, in this day and age where everything is disposable, and not stereotyping where things are manufactured or produced, but it's just so common that people they have this throwaway mentality. I'll buy it if it breaks. I'll buy another one because I got such a good deal. I will definitely never say, oh, we're the lowest, because we didn't want to race to the bottom on price point. We instead want to race to the top on quality control. But when you have that mentality of we build this to last, we want to make sure the customer service is there for whomever owns it and whomever bought it, rather be the first or the second person. So we're definitely big on customer service, and we do have the elements and support that's needed as far as any components along the way. So even something that we and I won't give too much away, I can sneak preview, but there's a next level coming to the machine you have. We're still going to have all of the elements and equipment needed to continue to sustain that machine for a minimum 7 years. We try to even keep them for up to 10 years because we've had machines last that long. We had friends that, again, we're all, NorCal. I'm based in SoCal, but trust me, I'm a NorCal kid at heart. If I could be back up there, I would. But we have friends up on the hill that, if you remember the car fire a few years ago that happened up there, and it really affected a lot of our friends and most of us are growers. I should disclose that at least I'd say a quarter of our company are growers or have been growers in the past, myself included. So when we heard the stories about friends, and we actually came across one individual, and we did a mini documentary on it. But one individual, he had one of the first machines. It was so rare because it was so early on that it technically wasn't in our file, because we keep a record of all serial numbers as a manufacturer. And so we thought it'd be nice to surprise him and replace that machine because of what went through. Because we went up there and saw, his whole operation was burnt to the ground, and you could just see what was left of the machine. And here this guy was talking about how, he is like, this machine didn't repay, because it was a very small operation. So he couldn't even have I know there's nicknames, but he couldn't even have the temporary staff, we'll say, to be PC, to come in and trim for him. He needed help. in the fact that he pointed out that it repaid itself within weeks, not within months or within seasons, but within weeks. So we did that for a few of the survivors that obviously lost equipment up there. But again, there's some that have, because of that, here, you take my machine, I was going to buy a new one anyway. We don't want to stop the support there. We want to continue the support because that's our way of supporting the industry that so many of us came from, you know?
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Did I read somewhere? Am I correct? Are you guys a veteran-owned business?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're a veteran-owned business, and we pride ourselves. One of our mantras or catchphrases, I guess, if you will, is being industry-born. Nothing against the other. I've known the other manufacturers just from my track record in the industry. You know, most of them being based out of Canada, which is fine. But again, a better part of us at this company are from California. Did grow up around the industry or in the industry. And so being veteran owned, but also being industry born are two things that we really make sure that we express from a marketing perspective, because it's really important. It's important to our customers and it's important to us. So,
right.
Yeah.
I'm very conscious about my partnerships and, you know, who I do business with. I want to make sure that, you know, they're in alignment with my vision and my beliefs. My brother's a Marine. So when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, so they were, you know, this is a company that I can get behind. It's a great product. Like, honestly, like if there was, I would never want a machine, but if, you know, I used to always say that, but if I had to, because people ask me, which machine, you know, do you recommend? And I said, I don't, you know, like I say, our trimmers, I'm like, we need to get little name tags that say, you know, we're not trimmers, we're trichome preservers.
Oh, I love that.
That's kind of what
Save the terps.
I said, you know what, I don't, but if I had to pick a machine, it would have to be the Greenbroz one because it's just so gentle with the blades and it really, you know, preserves the integrity of the product. So, and then I saw when I kind of, you know, went online and I was looking at, I think I was going to try to download the manual or something. And so then I saw that it was a veteran owned business and I said, okay, so this is, you know, these are those conscious partnerships that, you know, that I like to do. And this is kind of what we were just talking about, the conscious partnerships. When I want people to know, you know, when they hire us, you know, yes, we're providing a service, but you're also linking arms with someone who's a minority, a woman-owned business. My husband was incarcerated for, you know, for cannabis. I'm first generation born here, so I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And so you're really helping support, you know, someone that's, you know, social equity, you know, even though that term gets thrown around so much as like the freebie term, but it really is social equity. And it's like, you know, helping my business thrive is helping to kind of dissolve those barriers that have been there. And so I'm very grateful for my partnerships on the other end as well. So when I saw that you were veteran owned, I said, you know, this is a company that, you know, that I would love, you know, doing business with. Have you seen, so one of my questions is, and we talked about, I think in that podcast that we were, is have you seen a change in kind of 100% hand trimming? No, we're going to use all 100% machines. No, we're going to go back to hand trimming. Have you seen a big change in that?
You know, it's depending on the market, because not to oversimplify the segmentation of the market from the producer side, but you can look at one side of the spectrum, or the cottage or boutique style growers that we all know and love, and I've always supported. And then we have the larger scale, the LPs or large scale, you know, producers out of Canada, or even down here in my backyard in Santa Barbara. We have a 1.1 million square foot grow operation half an hour from my house. So we have seen these variations because they're scaling up so fast that the necessity is there. You know, the one thing that we always make clear in our communication, no matter if they're coming in to use us for the first time or they've scaled up and they scale back slightly, again, if they do that, it is typically centric to the cultivar, because they're starting to understand that, like you all said, it's all about saving the terps. It's all about saving the trichomes, because we talk about the entourage effect that really is accomplished with the terpenes and the cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are the engine. Terpenes are the steering wheel. That's what really gets you to that type of, right? So it's a term I like to express to help people understand. That's why it's so important. We've done testing. So I can share with you all, and I think we're going to do a white paper later this year. We actually did a testing of trimming in different ways, in different fashions. And our machine versus others found that there was a higher terpene count by using our machine, because it is so gentle. That's the kind of stuff we want to communicate to our customers, because some do have that concern, right? Because potency is still relative. To me, potency means potency across the board. This whole race to the top with THC, I don't know about you all, but when I drank, I didn't drink Everclear every time I went out.
You didn't like look at That's like I think that's one of the worst things. I don't mean to interrupt and sidetrack you, but that's like one of the worst things I think that has happened in the industry is
Yeah.
people purchasing based on THC percentage because they don't let you smell it. They don't let you crack the buds open. They don't let you. And I always kind of compare it to, if you went to the grocery store and all the produce was behind the glass and you're like, give me that one, give me that one. You can't feel it. You can't touch it. There's a barcode on it. And then you don't really get to see the quality of it until you paid for it and left because they're going to staple your bag shut. So you can't even look at it until you're in your car.
And you can't return it if you don't like it. There's no returns.
So it's like it's like the THC percentage. And like there's some of my growers, I'm like, oh my God, this is like my favorite strain ever is Red Congolese. The Red Congo is, I don't smoke often, but if I get my hands on some Red Congo, like I'm done. I'm like, get me a pound of it because it's so hard to come by. But it doesn't sell really good because a lot of times the THC percentage isn't really high. But I'm like, but there's like a totally different euphoria and like it smokes different and it like there's so many other things to appreciate about it. But unfortunately, when it's on the shelf, it's not going to bring in the top shelf dollars, and it's like that drives me nuts.
Yep. I'm definitely on the same page, and I appreciate this tangent because I speak of it all the time. I always talk about how I can't wait until the Cannabis 2.0 movement, not to be mistaken with what Canada calls the Cannabis 2.0. That's what they consider the concentrates coming into legalization. But in general, that's where I feel the 2.0 is. Our conversation, this whole indica versus sativa, first off, 90% plus are all hybrids out there in the industry. It's so hard to find a land race in a true purebred, even if it is backbred or crossbred. It's so hard to find those true cultivars. But the point being is the 2.0 is we should be having a conversation about what's your favorite terpene? Again, the foundation is there. Okay, it has a good balance of cannabinoids. I'm a bigger CBN or CBG fan than a CBD fan, but obviously THC is there for delivery. But for Melissa to say, I love myrcene, and for you to say, I love limonene, and for me to say that I love pinene, and and why, and what cultivar, because I'm with you. There's my rare to find is Northern Lights and Acapulco Gold, but also Sueño, which is this perfect 50-50 of Sour D and Blue Dream that's so hard to grow. It's so hard to find, but it has such a nice euphoric. But again, it doesn't have a high THC, so it's gotten weaned out, like literally weaned out of opportunity on the shelf. So it is frustrating. A friend of mine I mentioned earlier that really helped me segue into the legal was Ricardo Baca, and Rick has Grasslands as an agency. And one of the shirts that he made, his marketing shirt, says, "Ask me about my endocannabinoid system." I'm like, that's so cool, man. Because that's the start, right? Is talking about the ECS. And I explain to people, I love using metaphors and analogies in another life, third generation automotive family. So grew up in that and was a service writer. I was always good at translating the technical to the layman's for the consumer. So they understood why they needed their brakes repaired, why they needed their suspension fixed. And so the same thing with this, I always am explaining to people that, okay, do you use Tylenol? Do you use Sominex? Do you fill in the blank? Well, those things don't interact with our system. It's like trying to connect Lincoln Logs and Legos. Not that you can't build something, not that you can't create something, but really when you're talking about cannabis, it's Legos and Legos. We have an endocannabinoid system that can absorb and uptake that medicine. And that's the thing that's relevant about the equation, because the fact that you look at something like ibuprofen, and I had a chemist explain this to me, was that the reason why you can take 800 milligrams of ibuprofen is because the uptake is 50%. Only half of that medicine absorbs into your system. The other half flushes through because our body is not designed to take in synthetics. It's something we're forcing into that system. So huge tangent, but that's what I say. I have my own podcast, and I bring on educators. No matter where they are in the industry, the first thing and foremost are individuals like us, that every conversation is an education to who we're interacting with. I don't care if it's Uber drivers or flight attendants. I've had such great conversations with people when it's one-on-one.
Yeah, no, it is. Some of those one-off conversations, and you never know when a conversation with someone is going to leave an impression that leaves them feeling a little less hesitant to try it. Yeah. Or it gives them just enough curiosity where they're going to go check it out, and maybe they'll try something like any kind of plant or cannabis instead of the pills, or
Yep.
or it's like, you might, I think we're changing the world one Uber conversation at a time.
It's true. So sorry. So going back to your question, we do work closely with our clients. It's more of a consultative basis, and we work through those things when they talk about, well, it doesn't work so well that we talk about, okay, well, what is the cultivar you're putting through? Because we've identified some cultivars. Again, you all know, I have a good friend I grew up with in NorCal. He started suffering some PTSD growing in Humboldt, so he moved up to Medford, to Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And his winniness, you walk into one of his pole buildings and it always smells like forbidden fruit. He's got animal cookies and Skittles and all the trendy triangle strains, as I call it. His forbidden fruit always pops when I walk in there. And that's ironically, again, one of the cultivars that he can't machine trim. So he pays this trimmer that she does a phenomenal job on shaping those buds. So we respect that. There are some that just take that hands-on. And again, working with you all, like I would see you all as a channel partner, because we're here to support. And our goal in creating solutions is not eliminating workforce. It's quite opposite, actually. And a good example that Colin, our CEO, gives is, if you've ever been through a McDonald's drive-through, all of us probably eat naughty every once in a while. You go through and you see that the machine now automates pouring the soda and giving you the soda. If you noticed, or maybe you didn't, that was around the same time that they introduced that efficiency, was the same time they introduced dual line feed for the drive-through. So the end goal of bringing in that automation to the equation was not to eliminate positions. It was not to cut back their, what we call their FTEs, their full-time employees. It was allowing their employees to do other things and to be more productive, to where the throughput, the end result, was greater. So all of a sudden you could have 2 lines of cars coming into one drive-through, because there wasn't an individual that was spending a minute just filling 3 sodas.
Right.
All of a sudden, yep, right? So instead of doing that, they could be doing this over here. So what we find, and especially again with some of the scaled businesses, is the individuals that they had doing hand trimming, now they move them to quality assurance positions. Now they move them to throughput efficiency positions. So in many cases, the staff that does exist is even getting getting bonused or incentivized to the entire equation instead of just one element. So they're being promoted within. So a lot of people are. So again, it's a funny analogy to compare McDonald's, but you don't see any less people working at McDonald's with that automated machine. You just see them putting out the product that much quicker.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I think one of the things that I've realized too is, when I first started the business and it was just a trim crew, we just had trimmers in the beginning. Now we've added to our services, but it was 100% hand trim. And when you come from the traditional market, like, you'd be crazy to send your stuff off to get trimmed and then come back. Oh my gosh,
yeah. You barely trust the people that were on your farm.
Exactly. So I thought, like, there's no way I'm gonna set up a processing center, because there's like, do you have somewhere where, and I said, no. That was 3 years ago, but now it's evolved and it's changed so much. For one, a lot of people that were, there's people that went weed to corporate, and the people that went corporate to weed. So there's a lot more people that were like corporate to weed, and outsourcing is just in every industry. You outsource. That's just kind of what you do. I was a project manager for JP Morgan Chase for 15 years in information systems. I set up call centers, and we outsourced to like India and to Brazil and Costa Rica. And so I'm very familiar with the whole outsourcing and the systems and doing all that kind of stuff. And so this has kind of now become like any other industry where, you outsource stuff. And so the idea of sending stuff out just, became a little more acceptable and okay to do. People got a little more comfortable. Okay, now the vans have to have cameras and a cage. Okay, maybe the theft isn't there. So those risks and things that we were once afraid of, we're not so afraid of anymore. And so that was kind of one of the evolutions. And then also people were tripling their canopy, but their trim room is the same size. So you can bottlenecking, you can only get a certain number of bodies. And then COVID hit. Now you can still only get less people in there. And so about a year ago is when I finally decided, you know what, I need to get my processing center. Like there's so much wheat to go around. I can control the variables. I can control the environment, the humidity, the dress code, with my SOPs, I could put out a better product, because sometimes people's facilities are kind of questionable when it comes to safety or even dress code. I'm like, people are hand trimming without gloves. Are you crazy?
Oh yeah.
So there was a lot of things that were once acceptable, but now like we've got lab tests. And I tell my crew, you guys are the gatekeepers. You're the last hands to touch them before it goes into the jar. If there's a hair, if there's a dust bunny, if there's, I don't, whatever it is, you pick that out because
Yeah.
that's going to end up in the jar, So I got, it's just changed so much since when I first started. So now a processing center is absolutely like the next step. And so a year ago is
Yep.
when I started putting together the business plan. And so now it also becomes an issue of kind of price point. We have some people that, yes, I'd love to hand trim, but I can't afford the hand trim. Or if it's outdoor or greenhouse, which already has a lower price point, selling point, and then you're spending, a couple $100 or whatever it is to get it processed, it just becomes a price point. So that's when I realized, you know what, I can have different services, different, package deals where 100% handbook, 100% trim, machine buck, hand trim. How about
Mhm.
machine buck, machine trim, little bit of touch up?
Yeah.
There's
Yep.
there's something in there for everyone. And so that's when I started to think, okay, well, I think Greenbroz might be a good machine. And then fast forward, I was actually able to find a used machine. But then so the hybrid model, there's even different ways of doing that. Like I said, the bucking and the trimming, or hand bucking, but a little bit of machine trim. There's so much, in between. So I said, okay, when I do get the processing center, not if, right, Melissa? We're not saying if, it's when.
When?
When we get
Good
the process.
mentality to have as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, when we get it, I was
Yep.
told no in Tracy. We didn't pass, which is, we're all filing appeals because there's definitely some kind
It's
of
kind of a bummer because Tracy
nepotism.
has the potential for being that. I mean, Melissa, I think you and I briefly spoke of that. That
Yeah.
Tracy it's in a phenomenal position being 5 and 580. I mean,
Yeah,
you can get it
it's
from everywhere.
yeah, Northern California, Southern California.
Yep.
That's why all the distribution centers are here. Safeway is here, Crate and Barrel is here,
Yep.
Amazon is here, FedEx is here, the Costco distribution centers here. All the distribution centers are here because of the triangle. That's why it's the Tracy
Yep.
Triangle between all the, the highways. So they're filing appeals. And if I get it here, great. If I don't, I'm not going to spend too much money here. There's other jurisdictions that would be just almost like a turnkey with the
Yeah.
permit. But the processing center is definitely kind of like the next, it's the next evolution of my business too. We'll still have the ancillary. We'll still go out and do the hand trimming because there's some people that are still like, nope, not leaving my site. You're going to touch it here, process it here. I don't want it out of my site. So that'll still continue. But I think with the processing center, I'll be able to offer the different services with some machinery or not. If they do that, the bud sorter with the bands, that thing is like my favorite. I don't
Well,
mind.
I know this is where, and again, it was nice. The first introduction, or first point of contact, at the company was with Melissa. She was so kind in what she said, and that was the exact same approach that we have. I mean, because we see you all, again, it's not a this or that. Exactly to your point. In so many instances, it's a hybrid solution. So I personally see you all as a channel partner. Not just a strategic partner or a channel partner, but technically you can be both, because we can be there to support you. Because to your point, depending on what they want, it can be this, that, or the other. And also we have other solutions. To your point, it's the sorter, the bucker, dry sifters. We're not just trimmers. We are a harvest system solution company. So we really have all these different things that, again, can just be more efficient to bring it, because this is a time sensitive product. That's a thing that, you kind of alluded to, but it's very relative. If someone scales up their grow operation, there's still a set amount of time to process all that flour, or else it's going to be in this holding pattern that could compromise the terpenes, the trichomes, the overall moisture level, the oxidation. It hurts my head to think about.
Yeah.
But you have a set amount of time to dry, a set amount of time to cure, a set amount of time to process, get in a package, and get down the line. So it makes sense. It's almost like like the wine industry. Again, they have estate wineries where they do everything on site. And then they have the bottlemeisters that come in and do it for them, or they send it out and have it done at a bottlemeister. You guys are doing that same thing,
Right.
which isn't a novel concept. It's an awesome concept, because you're helping the farmer. They can't afford to have employees full-time year round for a job that's segmented for a certain time or point in the process.
And then it's also the accessibility to the equipment. A lot of them don't have the capital to go out and buy this equipment that they might only need every 8 weeks, depending on how big they are. And It's like, if you hire us, now you have access to all of this machinery through us, and we know how to use it. We maintain it. we have the insurance to cover it. And it's like, bring it here. You have access to our machines.
Yeah.
You might not have the capital. Or there's, you know what, there's always all the, you know, like in Northern California, there's all the outdoor farmers whose property isn't zoned for a building or for a structure. So they can't even process on their property. They can't even bucket. I just learned recently that there's some, they're not even allowed to buck because bucking is considered processing. And you have to have a break room and a bathroom and a structure and a building to be able to, you know, to process everything. And again, in the wine industry, they're allowed to do all kind of stuff. Why, you know, out on the field. How come we can't do it? You know, that's what drives me.
Including not child resistant containers.
Right. Right. Or
Still
like,
never understood that.
I can go into the liquor store and I could buy 100 bottles of vodka and drink them all tonight and drink myself to death. But I can go to the dispensary and buy one cookie because it's 100 milligrams and I can't buy more than whatever, you know, the dosage is. So yeah, so that drives me insane. But so the processing center, I said, like, having access or giving the farmers the access to all of that equipment so that they can process it, because maybe it is a price point and they can't spend all the money and they don't have the budget or the funding to do 100%, you know, hand trimming and the packaging, the labeling, all that kind of stuff. And so it's nice that we might be able to provide that service. Do you have any questions for us or anything that you wanted to talk about? Because I'd love to hear about what you got to offer.
Yeah, no questions for you all. So obviously, you know, it's awesome to hear the story of what you're doing. And again, what we were talking about just now, you make a really good point on how a lot of especially the cottage style growers, right? Because while there's just as much canopy being grown in, say, Santa Barbara County as Humboldt, Mendocino, you know, Trinity put together, still, you know, there's these small scale growers and many times, you know, are cottage style growers or sub-acre growers, and they don't have the resource. I mean, I know a few models. There's a company in Denver, just as an example, they rent out a machine for $200 a day. And still these growers will pay all day because they don't have $6,000, let alone $15,000 or $20,000 for a system. So as you all transition into more of that business model of being a one-stop shop for processing, where do you see your footprint going? Because right now a bulk of your focus is in Northern California, right? But I know there's a lot growing in Central California or even Southern California.
Yeah, no, there is. So we've at one point, I actually did have a regional manager, and she was down in Victorville because Adelanto's. I had quite a few clients there in Adelanto, and it was challenging, but we were, you know, kind of growing, and I had her down there, and so I had a couple of teams down there, and I do get calls in Southern California. So I think with both businesses, the nice part about having the ancillary business where we go is once we build the relationship and build the rapport, a lot of times it's like, you see how we operate and you trust us. Maybe you want to send this to the processing center because we also have a processing center. And so, you know, I do, and I have a call set up with Flocana. Flocana's been wanting to partner with me because they're like, look, we got so much weed, we need people. So they want to use the trim business, the ancillary business, to help support them with their operation because they can't get enough, you know, trained, qualified bodies in the building to help them process. So, you know, they want to develop a strategic partnership there that anytime they have an influx of work or they just need, you know, they can pick up the phone and say, hey, Bella, I need 15 people or 5 people. Yeah. So I can support them in their operation. But then also eventually, once we have the processing center, anything that either they don't have the room for or they can't, or whatever the reason is, we can, you know, partner with them. Also with Trimco up in Northern California. Well, I guess they're in SAC now too. Same thing with them. He said, look, there's plenty of weed to go around. So if there's something that I can't, let me send it to a partner, whether there's a commission in there or something, a kickback or something, great. But I think locking arms with other processing, and it's like, it's competitive, but it doesn't have to be a negative competition. Like, I don't think anyone can grow less weed.
So, there's only more being grown. You're spot on. So
I definitely see, and this is kind of where we were headed right before COVID hit. We, you know, we've searched everywhere for software to do what I wanted to do. You know, because there's a software that takes you from seed, you know, to sale. The trimming part of it is this part of it, but for me, the trimming part of it is this part of it. What's your trim rate? Why is she getting 10% byproduct and you've got 40% byproduct? Well, you know what? I don't even have to look at the weed and I could tell you're probably leaving it super leafy and you're probably shaving the shit out of those buds. The numbers don't lie, you know? And so I like to track everything. You know, performance is really, you know, important. If one person's getting a pound a day and everyone else is getting 3 pounds a day, well, what's this guy doing? Is it strain specific? Is it, you know, so there's a lot more, you know, data that I want to be able to capture so that I can manage my business better, manage my clients better, but then also the performance of each trimmer. So we started to write our own software. We tried and tried with different, and then we had a company and we tried, and it was just a horrible. We tried to take someone who's used to doing agriculture, like strawberries and lettuce and melons. And I said, it's just a different widget. It's kind of the same thing, but then it doesn't tie into metric. So then that's like a whole nother ball of wax, you know? So, but the thing with what I wanted to do is I wanted to get the software to where we want it, get it dialed into to get the results that we need so that we could bring the plant tags and follow it all the way. And then eventually license it. And then kind of, you know, my vision was to be like the Molly Maids of weed, right? So anytime you need someone, a team to come in, do the job, and then you call us the next time, you call us and we come in and do the job. Same thing with the processing center. You know, we want to set one up, you know, in California, eventually go to other states, but we want to, you know, set it up so that it becomes, we have our transport license. We go get it from wherever it is. We bring it to our processing center where the hand trimming is there. The machines are accessible, all that kind of stuff. And so I definitely want to go into other states. Like I said, we were running, we had 50 employees and all these partnerships applied for the processing center. And so when COVID hit, it was kind of like, you know, kind of came to a little bit of a standstill because we are kind of a staffing solution also, the brand ambassador program. So really getting to know our clients' products. We're the ones trimming it. We're the ones getting to know it, the smell of it, the stickiness of it. So who better to go out there and represent your brand than the people that are touching it and really know, you know? That's so the brand ambassador program is kind of another thing that we're going to have as part of the staffing. So we just want to be able to support and be a one-stop shop for a lot of the different needs of, you know, of our clients and, you know, eventually go to Mexico.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we'd love to support and work with you. Like I said, I see the partnership on so many different levels as far as a possibility. And, you know, you went out, you got a used machine. I'm sure we could help you out a little bit with additional machines at an excellent rate, because again, I just see the opportunity and we love to complement those that support the industry. And it's just like you're saying with other individuals, it's not a competition, it's a cohesion in solution. So that's what excites me about this for sure.
Do you have do you guys have either like a showroom or do you have a place like when people want to look at the machine in action, are you able to show them like a live demo where they can ask questions and actually put the product through?
We do. We recently moved our operation to North Las Vegas, and we have a full-blown showroom. Actually, it's 25,000 square foot area in total, but we have a full-blown showroom with all of our equipment staged there. We also have a remote showroom with partners in Colorado, and then also we're going to bring one online on the East Coast. But yeah, we fly, especially again, more than just a channel partner, like a strategic partner like yourselves, where we'll have them come out and actually tour the facility, see the operation, meet the team, see it from start to finish, just like you'd want to share your processing facility to your clients and your partners. We do that as well. So it's a pretty quick flight direct from Oakland to to Las Vegas and do that. So we'd love to have you out on that note. To see
that'd be awesome. I had talked to someone else about, they wanted to pitch us their equipment, and they were pretty persistent. And I said, well, I want to see it in action. Like, do you have any clients or partners or someone, like, I want to see what does it look like while you're doing it, because I might have questions, and like, how much do you have to prep the buds or the plant? And and they're like, well, we don't have anyone. I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, if I were to have your equipment, I would want to partner where it's kind of like I can be kind of your showroom or your demo place, where clients could Zoom and we could, do the machine or come. And they didn't have anything like that. So I was just like, well, I don't really want to put money into a machine if I've never seen it operate or work. So if you guys have one,
that's where my mind goes. And again, not, to get too far ahead, but the fact that even if it's not Tracy, say it's Livermore, I mean, it's still something that's in Northern California that's a realistic, accessibility to many in the industry. That's where an opportunity could exist on a partnership as well. And, that's a whole other level, because it really ties in more of the marketing elements, which is where a heavy amount of my focus is. So I see multiple opportunities on where we could work and support each other also, obviously.
What is the channel, like you were saying, like a channel relationship, what does that look like?
So with the channel partnerships, so typically you reference channel partnerships as, individuals, rather it be on a distributor, wholesale, or otherwise. So to your point, like you mentioned before, if you all ended up subsequently being a showroom of sorts, then why not the opportunity to offer the machines? I mean, there's obviously quite a bit to work with in there. You all be so intimate with the machines because no one would be processing at the level you are, to where the opportunity to be there. The strategic partnership would be more along the lines of cross-promoting via marketing.
The channel partnership, I could totally see, us kind of being advocates also, because, if we're using the machine and it's not that we don't believe in hand trimming, because people a lot of times are very black or white when it comes to it. And then there's people like us that understand there's a place and there's a way that you can use like hybrid models too. But, a lot of times when people say machine, I'm sure you get it all the time. Ugh, what do you mean machine? I wouldn't care.
It's like the I still have friends up on the hill. They're still paying $150 a pound for hand. And I'm like, that doesn't leave much margin for you. I mean, it's gone up a bit, but I remember when wholesale prices were down to 1,200 across the country, we were seeing some wholesale as low as $1,000 here, which is so crazy, right? Because 10 years ago, $4,000 was
4,000.
yeah.
Right.
So it's baffling. But I'm like, how can you afford that? I'm like, you're backing into your what we call your net per pound. I mean, gosh, are you able to keep the lights on? Because you're not a non-for-profit. You still have all those expenses. So a lot of them have come around to understanding again that, oh, maybe it's not so bad, because even just knocking the sugar leaves, I mean, even just to your point, just a rough, just to get it so that the time spent per pound, all of a sudden they're having their hand trimmers go from, to your point, like 2 or 3 pounds per shift, maybe 4 pounds for someone that's just an absolute machine, metaphorically speaking, but going all of a sudden to where they can do 5 to 7 pounds a day, because they're able to at least get that initial trim out of the way, and then they're just fine-tuning. They're just fine-tuning the buds. So I think people are coming around, and it's not us versus the machine. This isn't Terminator. I'm, Sarah Connor on one side and Schwarzenegger on the other scenario. Again, I think the opportunity is there for both, and just acknowledging that it's dependent on the cultivar. It's dependent on are you working with something larvae, or are you working with something dense? Is it indoor, outdoor? But all those things factor into how you process the flower. So
I was just talking to someone. He's a pretty big hemp operation, and I was just literally the day before yesterday. I was blown away that he still pays for hand trimming. And I said, you're selling that for like what, $300 a pound, 400 maybe, and you're still paying for hand trimming? How is that even? I mean, it's outdoors, so this overhead it's not like it's PG&E and all this other equipment stuff, but still, like, to pay per pound of hand trimming, that's when I said, you might want to consider, like, maybe we can test it out for a day, give me some product, we can run it through my Greenbroz machine, and then let's see how much we can get done in a day, and let's see what it looks like. Can you really tell the difference? I'm like, sometimes, like, I still have my little, my little loop. Sometimes I go over and I'm like, let me see if we could really tell the difference. Let's see if those trichomes are still there. And it's like, let's really compare it and see how much of a difference. Is it worth what you're paying? I couldn't believe he's still 100% hand trimming. So then that led me to believe, like, there's a whole other industry, the hemp industry, because the price point isn't the same as it is with cannabis, but there's minimum wage.
It's true, because I have heard of a few buddies in NorCal, like top shelf smokable hemp, which is cultivars that a lot of them are coming from Spain, where they literally just wean out the THC, so they are able to get into some of the more trendy triangle strains. So even those, like, some of them are saying they can fetch 900 per pound. To your point, that's an exception to the rule. It is more so 300 or 400. I mean, if it's boofy, it's 50, $100, $200, whatever. But yeah, that's exactly it. But again, going back to the same thing with indoor growers down here where they're netting out. But to your point, when it's nice having, a controlled environment, but that comes at what expense? All of a sudden, to your point, you've got HPS lighting, you've got your HVAC, you've got just your oscillating fans, all these things add up. Some of these guys are at $800 to $900 per pound. That's just producing that flower. So to your point, you're talking about all these additional costs when you net out. It's just not advantageous. So when I was hearing that, some people even renting machines on the daily for a few $100, that adds a whole other layer. So all of a sudden, again, a solution that you're offering, don't try to afford the machine. Don't try to rent the machine. Just let us come in and do this for you. And let us give the amount of attention that it deserves, because you talk to any smart grower and they say growing's half the battle. And I, as a grower, I completely agree. The cure, the dry, the trim, all those things is the other half of that battle. So yeah, it's great that you worked out the formula on growing some phenomenal flower. Now treat it that well all the way through the process, and take care of it and be cognitive about your expenses, So
that's where I think it's like where the machines. And so I just offered it to him the other day, and I said, even if you don't want us to process everything, the daily rental. I have quite a few rents that they rent them for a couple $100 like for the day. On the days that I'm not using it, I could, I could rent it out to him, and that's so much more cost effective than what he's doing now. So I'm like, I can't believe it. So yeah, so I'm very excited. I think like we were talking when before you hopped off about like the channel, the partnership, and I think we could definitely help ease some people's concerns about it, because we can, in for lack of a better words, kind of advocate for the machines, because there is a place for them, and especially if it's someone that's really struggling. It's like, look, my team's going to hand trim this half, and we're going to machine trim these couple pounds. Let's see what it looks like, and then you tell me what your comfort zone is after that.
Yeah, exactly true, right? And if you want a little fine tune, what the average cost per pound is going to be, so we have that CPP based on what you're comfortable with, what you want your end product to be. And this can be relative, again, to what you bring me. If you're bringing me your low end, or if you're bringing me your mids, that could be one solve. If you're bringing me your top shelf, that obviously can be another solve, that we're here for you, and you're willing to pay the additional money because you're able to obtain that higher dollar per pound. So it's just like you are taking the same approach that we do, as far as being very educational and even at times analytical, because that's how you have to be. The whole day of the hard sell has gone by way of the dodo bird. Like, nobody wants to be pressured into do this or do that or this or that. It's like, no, let's help you make an educated decision on what's most advantageous for you as an individual. This is a subjective conversation, not an objective conversation where one shoe fits all, So again, that's what excited me about, and again, I appreciate you reaching out, Melissa, and us having those initial conversations, because that's the thing that excited me. I'm so stoked that they understand that this isn't an us versus them conversation. No. It never really should be, in my opinion, because to your point, if you're like, we are the trim gurus. Our team can do 4 pounds in an 8-hour shift. We're absolute rock stars. That's great. We've got your bucking solution. We've got your sorting solution. We've got your throughput as far as processing goes. I mean, there's so many other things that we can do, even just sorting the sip, sorting the trim itself into a solution. Like, we are, again, when I say we're a post-harvest solution, we mean it. Like, we don't want to be, and that's why it's not in our names. So there's other guys, we're the, it's the trim this, the trim that, the trim and this, the trim. The trimming's one component. You all know. That's why you got into bucking. And even you being smart as a business owner and going, who knows the bud better than us? Maybe we should start, getting into advocacy, or getting into brand support, or getting into, that influencer or that industry consultant type position. Of course, because you guys know it and see it more than anyone else, So that's the same ideology we took, is we don't have to be just one thing. We want to be a solution, period, a system solution.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I'm super excited. Like I said, I can't wait for our processing center where we can control everything and just keep people, working full time, like a well-oiled machine. I actually just had someone reach out to me from Sebastopol, and he started calling me, I think in January. He started calling me, asking me questions about my services and trimming. Then he's called, and then at one point he said, I'm absolutely going to use you. So it's almost like he was already kind of baking me into the recipe. So when he launches, and I said, look, tell me how big your canopy is. I actually have like this whole mathematical equation, how much space you need per person, the square footage, along with equipment and everything, how many bodies you're going to need to support that canopy size, plus future growth. Like, let's partner together, And so now he reached out. So I think because we've, developed a certain trust, and he said, I absolutely want to work with you. And he said, I got the building, I got my permit. He's like, but I've got like 5,000 extra square feet. I think you'd be perfect for it. You can set up a processing center. It's turnkey. The landlord knows. He's like, I'm from Sonoma. I know everyone here. Everyone needs good trimming. It's like, he's like, here, it's for the taking, So I'm going to go check it out. And I'm like, I'm going to absolutely set up, the environment so that it protects the integrity of the weed, but then there's going to be room for machines for wherever we can, use a hybrid model to bring in the machine. So I'm excited about the partnership too.
Yeah, I think it's all there, and it gets my mind going. I mean, even what you're talking about, that even if you were doing something mobile, I mean, the fact that you could set up, I mean, for all intents and purposes, almost like that Bottlemeister mentality, where, to your point, you come in with that trailer. That trailer has everything they need.
Yeah, we have one. Yeah,
and you just bring it on site with the equipment, and it's all wired. You literally plug it into their 210, and you're set. I mean, it's an exciting. It's one place where so many people, it's a pain point that so many other people haven't addressed or delved into. Because to your point, it's not easy. I mean, I've been a business owner 3 times over. The workman's comp alone in California this is the third hardest state in the union to do business, for the record. Texas is number one, and we're third from the bottom. So props to you just for doing a business model that is centric around human capital, because that in itself, as you learn, so many hurdles and so many ups and downs, and my gosh, it's next level, so it's
That's
awesome what you guys.
Like, we're the business you didn't know you needed.
Yeah. But better to know us and not need us than need us and not know us is your
Right.
response, right?
Yeah.
So it's very true. It's very true. Well, yeah, I look forward to additional conversations. I think a next step would be great when convenient for you all and when comfortable. That's the most, because we're the same thing with our team. Our human capital is our biggest asset as a company. And so when you all feel comfortable, obviously to come out as our guests to Las Vegas, would love to have you out to see the facility and to have those conversations, to be a part of your plan for growth.
Yeah, no, I'd actually welcome that visit probably sooner than later, Melissa. Let's kind of figure that out, because as I'm kind of planning everything out, I actually just had while I was in Costa Rica, I had I was interviewed by, the parent company with Jay-Z, the new big company. I don't know if you've heard of that. So they bought out, Kaliva, and they bought out, I think it's Left Coast Ventures. So now there's this big mega weed company.
Conglomerate, yeah.
Right. So under them, they have Jay-Z has a social equity program. So I just sent an email, and I was interested in it, and I sent my links to everything. The guy checked me out. He interviewed me while I was in Costa Rica, and I said, I think this could be a win-win. I said, because I would love the mentorship, access to your marketing, access to all of that. The obviously investors for this processing center, because instead of making one like this, I could make one like this. Or I could make 5
you could grow into it. Yep.
Yeah. And so I was like super excited about, him interviewing me. He's like, we usually only work with existing cannabis businesses, but I'm so intrigued by, and it's also like my whys, there's a couple of kind of my own initiatives around social equity that I have going on. And so he said, let me see if we can at least get you some funding to get you through the application process. And then we can revisit locking arms when you actually have your permit, because I think it would be I was like, I could be your poster child for social equity.
Yeah. And not a bad location to be for that as well. And you bring up some good points. I mean, while 36%, or according to MJ Biz Daily, their last report, 36% of those in leadership in this industry are female, it's still not enough. And to your point, also from a minority standpoint, it's still not enough. I mean, that's what excites me about hearing people like Jay-Z who are putting social equity as a part. Cookies too. I mean, Burner's got a great social equity program. Several of these individuals who have louder voices on the mainstream platform as it pertains to cannabis are starting to pitch up. But again, it's something that's needed. So that's exciting to hear that they would respond and be tapped in, because you're right. This is, I mean, it's a big deal. It's a big deal what you're doing.
A really big deal.
Yeah.
I said, I think that for me, it's also, my success is obviously we all want to be successful. I said, but my reason for being successful, in addition to myself, is all of the people that I could potentially help. I said, I'm going to throw everyone in my wagon and take you along for the ride. Let's go,
Yeah.
But, one of my really, really close friends is the director of, there's the Last Prisoner Project, right?
Yes. Mary.
They
Mary and Steve and
they help people, fight for their freedom, and eventually they come home. But then it's like, what happens to them once they are released? So one of my girlfriends is at Stanislaus State, and she's the director of Project Rebound. And what they do is they basically, and some people are still in prison and getting ready to be let out. She helps them apply for college, gives them a scholarship, helps them buy books, tuition, sometimes even some living expenses around the holidays. They actually gave out grocery store, gift cards. And so I want to give scholarships, especially if it's someone that was previously incarcerated for weed. Like, let's just come full circle. Let's give them the education and everything that they missed out on because they got arrested for weed. They lost their whole life. So they come home, and it's like the Last Prisoner Project releases them, but it's like, what happens after that? They don't even know computers. Half of them have never even used a computer. They don't know how to use email. And so I partnered with her. And so right now we're just doing donation to help with the project. But I would love to be able to give a full ride scholarship to someone at some point. And so
Oh yeah.
I was telling him that's kind of my other why, is being able to help people when they come home with job skills. Do you want a job? I got a place for you where you can work, where that history doesn't matter that you were in prison, you know? So
Yeah,
it's
this whole
those things.
that's going to be the big thing, and I love seeing unfortunately it isn't moving fast enough at the state level. I think municipalities are moving in the right direction, but at a state level, love to see the expungements happen quicker. We even have an employee who's in that, which we know the background, we know the circumstance. We're still comfortable with employing them. There's nothing that says you can't employ someone who has a felony record on cannabis.
Right.
So we support it, but even ties myself to Steve and Mary over at Last Prisoner Project. Kind of fun story. I had a brief stint at Greenflower, which is an education platform in the industry, and actually set up a $50,000 scholarship for education to individuals they're working with. Because to your point, they do a phenomenal job in going out there and lobbying and supporting the release. And that was one good thing that came out towards the end of the last 4 years, was how many people were released or were expedited in the release process. But my gosh, what they're doing, it's great, but they're bringing in partners to help support that. Because you're right, getting out's half the battle. I mean, we've all seen whatever movie that points out the obvious, like Shawshank Redemption. You get out, now what? Like, that's great, you got out, but not just catching up on your life, but your curriculum, your education, your opportunities. This is a whole new world, even if you've been locked up only for 10 years versus 20 or 30 or 40 years, like some of these individuals have. How much has changed?
Right.
I
It's
mean,
a completely different world.
it is.
It's like dropping you off on another planet.
Totally is. Totally is.
It's
So that's
insane.
cool to hear too. You're in the great place for it too. I mean, so much of this movement comes back full circle to where it all began back in San Francisco with Prop P in 1990, and even before that with, Brownie Mary and the crew and everything. Like, all of this whole movement really started in Northern California. And so that I think is a big part of your story too.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no, definitely. It's nice to be able to get on here and talk podcasts and talk to people and say, like, yeah, I grow weed, I trim weed. And it's like, it's not such a secret anymore. So it's just nice, the openness about it, but there's still that moment of hesitancy, like, yes, I've been doing it for 15 years. I want to say that. That's my experience, that's my resume, but I don't want to go to jail.
No, I know. I came out of the proverbial green closet 4 years ago, and I don't put it in people's face. I mean, even when I traveled, oh, what are you in town for? I'm in town for a convention. What kind of convention? Cannabis. Can of what? I'm like, marijuana. I hate using the slang terms, but and then all of a sudden, oh, okay. And like I said, it's especially on that one-on-one, but people don't judge when it's one-on-one. Right. It's always when it's in these packs, or it's when it's in these groups. You do what? You've done what? For how long? And it's like, really? Like, the 2020s, people. This isn't the 60s, let alone the 30s or 40s. No. The reefer madness days. Like, come around. So anyway, but I love how your podcast is. Like I said, I have one myself, and I always lead with education, which I'll have to have you on. It's Cure to Consumption, and it's on a Hayes Radio network. And I'm usually in the studio every other Sunday. So I believe this Sunday we're taking off, but next Sunday, if that's something that might work. And I'll send you guys the details. But would love to have you on to talk, because that's what we talk about, is individuals that aren't just successful in the industry, but really have that focus of education and giving back to the industry. So we'll circle on that. It'd be awesome.
All right. So we've got some work to do. All right. Nice. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. It's worth the wait. I was looking forward to this for the last few weeks, but definitely
awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right.
All right.